Niceness culture. What is it about worrying about being nice? And is there really a difference between being kind and respectful to others? And what is the impact that making sure everything is okay and everyone feeling good does to your ability to get to action and get really awesome results as a company? So today, Roxanne and I are going to talk about the hazards of the nice culture. Hit it. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Exactly. Oh, wow. We're saying good morning today.
I know.
Because
We
it's
started
earlier
an hour
than usual.
early.
Yeah.
Started an hour early. We are experimenting, moving things around, so bear with us. But guess what? We're game changers. What can you expect? And we're okay with being fluid sometimes.
Sometimes.
It is what it is. Now, I don't know how my day, as you can see here, it's been really crazy because we moved our schedule, and I had to kind of slap on the hat and maybe some little lipstick to look okay today. How are you doing today? I know it's been a busy week for you as well.
And it keeps going. Yeah, it's crazy. It's great. But you know what? I'm not gonna complain about being busy, but I can complain about things overlapping. So I totally get you.
You mean time management?
Oh!
So, and it's funny because in organizations, the whole point of our topic today is the hazards of a nice culture. When there's so much to do and so much happening, and you're so worried about being nice and everything kind of avoiding conflict and talking about things, how hard is that to get to action when that's what you really need when the pressure's on?
It's almost, wow. It's almost impossible, right? Because you feel like you're not even in control of your own schedule. Because if you're always gonna try and be nice, so that people like you, so that you don't jeopardize relationships, because that's how we think about it. And everything you think about is, I can't say no because I'm not at that point where I can say no. I cannot say that I don't like it. I cannot disagree. Well, actually, the point that we're trying to make today and what we're making the case for today is learning how we can do that in a healthy way, in a way that doesn't jeopardize your relationships, but grows them even further. Because a nice culture can be toxic.
Yeah.
A nice culture doesn't necessarily mean that it's also kind.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations around this, and we've actually talked to a couple of people that have followed us and reached out and said, wow, I'm in a toxic environment. And remember if you guys haven't, or all of you, I always say that word, but then it's not, I'm trying to say all of you folks, if you go to Gaslight topic, I forgot the name of it. We did it a few weeks ago, or maybe it's been a couple months now, about gaslighting and that toxicity. But getting back to the hazards of a nice culture, so let's talk about the first thing is, why do we even have nice cultures?
Well, I think, it starts from a place of, a good intention that, first of all, we want to collaborate. We want to feel that we belong. Like, as social beings, we want to be part of the tribe. And what organizations have known for a while is that where you have people collaborating and working well together, that's where you get your results, and you have better results, and you have the profits, and you have people who are happier, and so on. But I think like essentially we start with wanting that place of genuine inclusion, that place where we all agree on what the next best steps are. And then if we're not careful, it can, turn into avoiding conflict at all costs, wanting to agree at all costs, and then not looking at what people are disagreeing with, because maybe that's a good idea to look at in more depth. And we're exaggerating our defense, because that's what tends to happen when we feel that, because we're not used to somebody giving us feedback that we don't necessarily like, we start getting into that defense mode, that self-defense mode. Oh, all right, so here's what's happening. And this is where the nice can become toxic. So it starts with a good intention, and then if you don't manage it carefully, it can get into becoming pretty toxic.
Yeah, and let's talk about those, because I love where you're going with is, it is definitely good intentions. A lot of them are trying to create an environment that is nice. I mean, it's a huge thing these days with diversity inclusion, and cultivating cultures with, really, ultimately, it's about respecting each other and learning how to have healthy conflicts.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging. And I know that we put in our comments before we had the show, where it's a combination of mindset and how we effectively communicate. And what do I mean by mindset is we all have different models of the world. And a lot of it is unconsciously, we don't, or we may or may be aware of our unconscious way of how we approach things, how we get motivated about things, or even, for me, I always talk about the language and behavior pattern. I love the lab profile from Rochelle Charvet, is that you have, and it was created by Bailey, about motivation and productivity patterns, which is from the meta programs in neuro-linguistic programming language. And so when we actually really understand our model of the world, and that's where I'm talking about in the mindset, we're able to actually step in and really understand where other people are coming from. So we always talk about the word step into someone's shoes, have empathy. But even if, when you have empathy, and say you're learning, you're practicing your active listening, a lot of us out there, and those of you that might be watching right now, I noticed that 11 a.m. might be challenging. Let us know if you don't like this time as we're learning. And I can't see on the LinkedIn because I didn't want my eyeballs to always go the other way. That I empathize, I understand the person, but I'm so challenged to effectively communicate how to move forward. It's like we get stuck with each other. Then it starts to feel toxic and negative, because all we're doing now is swirling in how difficult we're in the situation. And then if you multiply it by the number of people, and everyone genuinely, it's not like I don't not like the person. I just don't know how to get through this, because we all approach things differently. But here's another thing, kind of jumping into the reasons. And this goes to avoid conflict and gain approval, right? So you talked about wanting to be liked, which creates that natural tendency to replace genuine inclusion. Ooh, now that's an interesting one. Now I'm looking at one of these articles that we pulled up, and when they talk about inclusion, right, they believe that everyone needs to be nice to be humane. And so there comes a point where there's an extremity to that. You have such good intentions to be humane that it becomes overpowering of niceness.
I like that. I love that. Um, and what I see a lot, especially with, and we talked about that. We both touched
Labeling is
on
one
that.
thing that causes that.
Labeling, exactly. And also that, like, with the new generations, for instance, with millennials, for instance, having a hard time to have difficult conversations and to give feedback, because you grow in this culture of positive reinforcement, where I'm supposed to give you the nice, I'm supposed to give you the good, but I'm not supposed to give you the bad. And the problem with that is that it diminishes trust, because trust, and that's what, like, we all agree that we want that on the team. But the minute I know that I cannot count on you to give me the good and the bad equally, that's when I know, like, how can I rely on you? Like, it's, and I use this example a lot, and maybe it's a stupid example, but if I had something on my face, and you see I have something on my face, and I'm talking to a bunch of people, and you don't let me know that there's something on my face, I go to the washroom and I see myself in the mirror and I say, oh my God, I've had this on my face the whole time.
That's
Why
like
didn't you
a
tell
piece of
me?
salad between your teeth and someone let you walk all day,
Exactly.
or like a woman's lipstick and it's bleeding and then it's
Yeah.
all over their
And
teeth.
it's exactly
I'm
like,
like, why
why
did
didn't
anyone
you
tell
tell
me
me?
that? And why are they afraid to tell me that I have lipstick on my teeth?
How are you? And let me ask you this, how are you being nice to me by not saying that to me?
It's almost kind of mean. It's a, I always, here's a public situation where you don't know someone.
Yeah.
And I think it probably happens more to women than men in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the toilet paper on your butt. You guys know what I'm
That
talking about? So most of the time, this is an event that strangers are around you that don't know
yeah.
you. And how many of you watch someone walk out of a public restroom with toilet paper on their butt, and because you don't know them, you don't say anything?
Mm-hmm.
I love when the person's brave enough to actually say that to me. Like, I've even had it where I'm walking down and someone catches me while I'm
Yeah.
walking and say it. And I'm like, and I laugh and I'm like, oh crap, thank you. How
Yeah.
long has it been back there? Now,
Exactly.
it's funny because a lot of women probably, I know most people have had this happen to them where they got that toilet paper on their butt. And the
And
other thing is the lipstick on
exactly.
the teeth, right? But the toilet paper on the butt is horrible.
And that's a great, that's a great example. Like, if you move this analogy onto the workplace, like, I want you to tell me there's toilet paper on my butt, rather than you ignoring it or looking the other way or pretending it's not there.
Because you're worried
Because you,
about what I'm gonna think because of you telling me that.
and especially,
And it's unpleasant.
and it's unpleasant, but I'd rather have the unpleasantness now than the erosion of trust later. That's much worse. Because later on, when I find out, because we do find out, it's like, I work with you and I don't like it when you do something, but I don't tell you. And we keep working together. I keep being frustrated, but I don't tell you. And at some point, something happens. And I tell you, oh, you always do this and I don't like it. Why do you keep doing that? And you're like, what happened here? Where does this come from? Why haven't heard about this before? Why haven't you told me about this
Or the
before?
person
And
shuts
then,
down.
or the person is like, whoa, what? And then, how is that better than you addressing that small issue right from the beginning, right from the start, and saying, I've noticed you doing this. I don't think it's productive. Like, for me, it's not productive. Could we change it? And let's have a conversation. We're not used to having conversations at work about things that we don't like. just as much as sometimes we just don't address the things that we like because we just take them for granted. But that's another discussion. But
Yeah.
that's where I choose to be nice now for the sake of protecting your feelings now. But that doesn't mean that I'm kind to you, because long term, I'm not.
Now, those of you that are watching us right now, or watching the replay, put in the comments some experiences that you might have
Mhm.
had when it comes to a nice culture, or you were actually in a situation where maybe you did something to help overcome that niceness, and it was like a
Yeah.
brave story, or you're the receiver of somebody brave enough to be able to get real. I'm going to call it the getting real.
Hmm.
But I want to talk about the dangers of the downside of a nice culture, because we misconstrue being kind and respectful, where you have organizations that are doing all these things to in the effort of being nice, hugs, all these feel good things, but at the same time, they're just surface that, but people still aren't getting real with each other and having honest conversations, which we know healthy conflict is what actually moves to action of creating change. And so we're in a time in our lives where a lot of change needs to happen to the circumstances that are existing in our world today. And what I mean by that is we have organizations that need to rethink the way they work,
Hmm.
how they are employees, where the whole idea of the employee experience getting engaged. You have some particular job roles that are in a very highly competitive market, and how do you keep them? Right. So there's that whole world of being challenged with just your employees internally.
Hmm.
You have pressures of, as an organization, of your personal branding. What are you doing to show the world that you have purpose, or that you're doing something that has a value, or attracting talent to even come to work with you for an organization? And then you have another third pressure, which is just running a business and still being in existence
Yeah.
in a highly volatile, ever evolving environment. You have
Yeah.
all these different pressures coming all these different ways in these organizations,
Hmm.
that if you have such a nice culture, how are you really getting real out there?
Yeah.
So down that's I'm curious, those of you that are getting what we're saying, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings about this subject? Tell us, talk to us. Now, the danger downsides of a nice culture, I'm going to read them through. And this is
Okay.
an article from the HBR, Harvard Business Review. So we try to use something that is what I'd say a respected article on there. And so they talk about some of the downsides. They talk about crisis activation. So and I already gave that example. I'm not even
Hmm.
reading this too. Wasn't that funny? Choked innovation. So
Yeah.
by its very innovation disrupts the status quo. And so the downside of a nice culture is that in order to challenge the status quo, you're going to have to be able to have these conversations that are going to move of how things work today. So if everything is so perfect, and everyone doesn't want to talk about change and what we need to change, or have these hard conversations, um, the downside is, how is that impacting your ability to innovate as a company? Right?
It impacts you a lot, because what I find with, there's, when we use nice as a label, that's when it becomes toxic. And like, I live in Canada. If you take Canada, for example, Canada as a country brand has nice attached to it. Like, people, like, if you describe Canadians, what's the number one word that pops to mind? Nice. Canadians are nice. That's like the culture of nice as a
That's like the
country.
South. here in the United States, where it's
Exactly.
that niceness culture, they
Yeah.
tend to not want to, they'll be nice to their enemy. Just
Yeah.
don't turn around, is what they
Yeah.
say.
So they're nice, they're welcoming, they're friendly. But then if you use the nice as a conformity, so you can only be nice this way, and then you have to conform to this way of being nice, then it becomes a problem. Then it becomes an issue. And then it stifles your creativity and your innovation, because people will feel they need to conform to just this mold to fit it, because otherwise they're not nice. And the reality is we're all different and we can be nice differently, and nice doesn't necessarily equal kind. So usually what I love replacing the nice with is kind,
Yeah, and
because kind can be, I can, pull you by the by the hand and say, hey, actually this is not the right direction, this is the right direction, and that's kind. And that's nice too, because I'm helping.
And just wrapping up with innovation, any of you that are highly creative people that really love
Mm-hmm.
to do innovation, and especially thinking about disruptive innovation. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you're really trying to disrupt the market and coming out with new things, how niceness can get in the way of that. Now let's talk about bleeding talent. So they talk about talented people want to make a meaningful contribution. So A players want a healthy culture in which they can be rewarded for challenging the status quo. And so if you are, I know I fit that mold.
Mm-hmm.
If I feel that I cannot talk about things, regardless of worrying about how it's received, because our game changer tonality, like, just of our nature is about challenging the status quo, seeing possibilities. Our ideas and the things that we bring up as a topic might ruffle feathers because it's challenging how we do stuff. And so when you talk about bleeding talented, and especially if you're trying to keep your game changers out there, and those of you that don't know what a game changer is, guess what? Roxana and I are one. So if you probably watch
Yeah.
this a lot, you'll get
Ask
a
us.
real idea of what a game changers look like. And they are the ones that you're highly at risk of retaining. And why is this a problem? Is the ones that have the higher inclination of these game changers, because they naturally are status quo challengers, they're the ones that are going to help you when it's time to change things.
Yeah.
And if you
Exactly.
don't have any of them in your company or a department or a team, you are going to stay as status quo and business as usual, and that might not work for you in today's market.
Yeah.
You might have seen that challenge in during the pandemic, because you had a hard time changing the way you work, and so everyone kept flailing and flailing and flailing, and everyone was stressed out. And so it's a compounded thing, because there was no one to help figure out how to get out of the way you work. You just kept on trying to work with what existed. Game changers have a very great way to see different ways of how to approach something, can help accelerate that process, especially when you're like, I love the escape room.
Yeah.
I love the escape room. I don't know about you. Maybe that's the game changer strategist in us or whatever, but I love the challenge, because I'm always creatively trying to figure out how to get out of there in that amount of time. And some people might not find that fun, but I don't think I've ever met a game changer that doesn't find that exhilarating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
It's
think
like,
so
oh my
too.
God, this is cool. So anyway, so bleeding talent, that is one of the others. So I'm going to move on to the next one here. Low velocity decision making. What's that? So in a nice culture, there's pressure to get along, right, and to go along with things. So a no tolerance of candor. I love that book, Radical Candor. Read it.
Mm-hmm.
Falls align with this well. To make the necessary discussion and analysis for decision making, it becomes shallow and slow. So how many of you that have ever been in a meeting because people can't have good candor, the results of it are half-assed, if that's a better way to say it.
How many of you have been in a meeting where nothing really was discussed, and then you
That's
get
even
out of
worse.
that meeting, right? And then and the thing is, you know what happens? A lot of people in that meeting, they know about some issues.
They won't bring them up.
Nobody talks about the issues. Nobody brings them up. After the meeting, what do? They meet separately to discuss about them,
Oh yeah,
right? And
that.
then how is that? How is that helpful? How is that nice? Because we waste so much time, so much energy, and at the end of the day, so much money. Because, right, we have to have 3 meetings instead of just one.
So we used to say the water cooler, but nowadays in a highly online distributed presence, chat. And it's so
Chat.
funny because someone will say X, Y, and Z is blowing up my chat, and
Yeah.
they're providing me this, and I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, why aren't they saying this out loud to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's because we have not created a space that people trust in psychological safety. Now that's a whole other conversation here. But niceness culture basically impacts the psychological safety
Yeah.
because we're not allowing ourselves to get there to want to create it because we don't want people to really have good candor. We're not wanting
Yeah.
the honest conversations. It's too difficult.
Exactly. I mean, and at the end of the day, I feel that it's not safe for me to contribute, to genuinely contribute and to be transparent. And if I cannot be transparent, if I don't feel safe doing that, I will not be able to build trust. What am I building trust on?
Yeah, and even the most bold person that is used to kind of getting scruffed up, I would say I'm used to that
Yeah.
my whole entire life. But then I get in situations where I feel beat down
Hmm.
that I just get tired of being the one.
Yeah, exactly.
I get
Yeah.
tired of being shot down.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of give up. And I
Yeah.
know at that point, when I start giving up, I'm probably that category of the bleeding talent.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now let's move on to the next one. Are you ready?
Go
So,
for it.
learned helplessness. Well, that's an
Yeah.
interesting one. So, an invisible norm of niceness can induce conformity, uh, passivity, and learned helplessness that lowers the bar of performance. So, we never really think about how a nicest culture can have a direct impact to your performance.
Yeah.
And performance is a
I
big thing. People care about that if you're running a business.
there and it's great that you said that, because so the latest research, by the way, is that helplessness is not learned. Helplessness is the default behavior when we are in a threatening environment.
So, it's environment driven.
It's environment driven. And think about it this way. So if people in the organization feel helpless, it's their default mode of reacting to an environment where they do not feel safe, an environment that they feel is threatening to them.
Yep.
How about that? And not, that's where nice can be threatening.
Yeah, and they talk about this is where their hopes of improving a situation,
Hmm.
people throwing up their hands
Yes.
and staying quiet. Now, does that sound
Yeah.
familiar to any of you? Comment,
Yeah.
let us know if you're watching the live or the replay. These are the things that we want to hear from you, because I know that either you observed it or you've actually experienced it yourself. Is I believe we need to really start acknowledging that this nice culture thing, we got to get past this. And I
Yeah.
was hoping that during 2020, maybe that was a realization that we have to stop it, right? It's almost like you need to change your habits.
Yeah.
I was hoping that that was the moment. But what I'm finding, and I'll go on my slight tangent here before we get to talking about combat niceness, is that I'm starting to see organizations going back to their old ways.
Mm-hmm.
I actually shed a tear. It went down right down.
Yeah,
here.
that's painful. That is painful.
And there's a combination of things. Like I'm seeing that they want everyone to go back to the office. They, are trying to recreate or regroup the culture that they had, instead of saying, is this the culture we should have? And reevaluating. Now, I'm not saying everyone's doing that, but you can tell, even if you look at the job boards out there, it's a telltale sign. Even you can see it. Nothing has changed. And I'm very curious because so what if they do? But what happens with the people that are looking for other jobs and the cultures that have realized they need to start changing and they're trying to figure it out? If the talent bleed, right, that ends up happening is going to force and put pressure on these other organizations that were, I'm going to call it, in denial about needing to change their ways. And so I'm going to get very curious because it's too soon to tell. So this is the thing. It's too soon to tell because even the ones that were at home, and I've always said this, is if you've been isolated, all you want to do is change the isolation feeling. But once you go back to work, what always happens is you miss what you don't have. And so we don't know. It's really highly unpredictable what your employees, contractors, workers, right, however we want to term it, are going to do now. It is a wait and see, folks. We don't know. You don't know if they're looking for a job, but they're kind of playing along with it, is my point. So it's something that I wanted to say, and I probably will say this all the time in our shows. It is way too early for us to understand what 2020 did to us.
Yeah, but if we don't look back and we don't start asking some questions and learn something from it, we'll never understand. So that is where it's super painful.
I'm hoping the people start showing the organizations what they want.
Exactly. So stop being nice for the sake of nice. Start asking some questions,
And
because
the way
that
they're going
can
to
be
show
nicer.
the way they're going to show it is leaving your company. And you're going to have a hard time attracting new talent because your personal brand is known for it.
Yeah.
So, combating niceness. Let's get back to that topic as we wrap up.
Yeah.
So, we talk about clarifying expectations, standards of performance, and meeting types. So, they get into some of the details here. Ambiguity feeds toxic niceness. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I find a lot in organizations, we're very meeting driven. And how many of you have Fomo out there? I talk about this a lot everywhere I go, is they got to invite everyone in the world because people feel like they're going to miss out. And it got even worse when we all went remote.
Yeah.
But you go to a meeting and we don't necessarily, it's very ambiguous. It's not really clear what the outcome is, the expectations, and everyone's not even aligned on what the outcome is. So you can imagine everyone thinking different things, and then that's why things start to go sideways. And so this is where structured facilitation and design of the meetings, if you haven't focused that on as an organization, it's a great training and mentoring and coaching, right? Because you got to practice and apply it. It's not like, oh, I went to a training and then I know how to do everything. Because when you're dealing with humans, that's not the case. One way might not work the other way with another meeting, by the way. And then the standards of performance. So when I saw this and read this, I kind of felt a little when it said standards of performance, because my natural inclination went to traditional thinking. And that's where I'm like, I don't like how this looks. Mm-hmm. We know that traditionally when we look at standard performance, it's sometimes in a lens where it's not, it's one way versus bilateral. Is bilateral the word? where it's a standard of performance happening both. So what I mean by that is, yes, I'm a company and I have certain goals and certain things that I need to achieve. And yeah, I know that this is going to get us there. And those are those things. Then you have the individual about how they want to improve and better themselves as a person. You could have a conflict with each other. And that's what when I talk about, when I was seeing the standards of performance, my natural question is, whose standard?
Yeah, who sets the standards? Who sets the standards? And I have a like that's one thing. And then who creates the development plan, because that's another thing, right? So it's as long as it comes from the top down, that's never gonna be wholeheartedly adopted by anyone, because it's I have a standard of performance. Did you ever bother to ask me what my standard was? I have my own development plans, professional and personal. Did you ever bother to ask me that? And did you ever bother to align those with what we have in the organization? Some organizations have done that, some of them haven't. And then you wonder why you talk to people and they're not like, you ask them, okay, what do you want to, what are some of the development points that you want to focus on, and they have no idea. Because like, how can I, because we haven't had this conversation before, like you haven't asked me, and my goals do not align with yours. So that's an issue. So when you talk about performance, like try to involve the people in that standard, in actually creating that standard, because that helps
Design
you give
thinking
feedback. Exactly.
for
Yes.
employee,
Yes.
and they're calling this the employee experience, the engagement
Yeah.
experience. And it's
Because you have
not
to have the standard, but
it's not an HR thing. That's a very traditional way to think about it. It is at all levels.
yeah,
It involves everyone in order to make
yeah,
that effective. So me being an agilist, right? We know that those feedback loops come from bi-directional, I think that's the better word,
yes,
bi-directional, vertical and horizontal.
yeah,
It's like if you take arrows, it's going all over the place.
mm-hmm.
And because we really want to understand the individual, the collective, and all the
yeah,
systems putting together, which actually makes this organization.
yeah,
And so when I saw this standards of performance, I did get on my little tangent in my head and had these visions. I was like, when they wrote this, what were they thinking? Right? I was
yeah,
telling
exactly.
them.
Yeah,
Now here's the next one. Publicly challenge the status quo helped you create. So don't expect others to muscle through the fear and usher in a new era of truth telling if you haven't modeled the behavior first. And so this is really talking about leadership.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of and that's what I love working on with the new managers, with especially millennials taking on to people leadership roles, because they're not used to being in this role, in the role of the empowered leader that actually has something to say and their voice is heard. And then when you talk about that, it's all about just seeing possibly who you can talk to, maybe before a meeting. Talk to people, ask them what their opinions are, and then tell them how you would like to challenge the status quo. Get some allies in there, get into the meeting, challenge the status quo, use your allies, and get some more followers. It's really one way in which you can actually make yourself heard and challenge. It doesn't mean that things are going to change overnight, because that's not necessarily what we're trying to do, but put it out there, because you might be surprised that other people in the room start opening up, and they start, their eyes are going to shine, and they're going to be like, oh my God, I can also speak. Like, they're saying what I wanted to say.
And this is where, going back to why I love like meta programs and really understanding people's model of the world, and a part of when we talk about influencing and creating change and all about effectively communicating. because as we're talking about, everyone can really be a leader. So when I saw this, it's the expectation of the people that are in management, HR type roles of they are supposed to be mentoring and coaching others, or people that just know inside them they influence and change things. You don't have to be on the HR books. I have never had a desire to be in a management role because I never thought it was needed to get to my goals personally. But it never took away my mentality as being a leader. But here's what was most challenging for me. And I always work on it today, because any of you that are probably like Roxana and myself as game changers, it's probably one of the number one things that is very challenging and painful is for other people to listen to our ideas or to get other people along with some of the things that we're trying to do. Because again, we're natural change agents. So I think we need to have a show just on how to support game changers. Now, another one is providing air cover for candor. And so they talk about when people do have the courage to express dissenting views and speak candidly, you want to protect them. And so this is really creating a container and a space where people feel that what they say, they're not going to be judged.
Yeah. That's where the environment comes in. And that's where it matters so much what kind of environment you're creating, where they feel safe to do that, where they feel they will not be judged. And because it's hard. Otherwise, it is very difficult. You can't make people open up. They open up once they feel safe. And if they don't, the big question is, what can I do to help create an environment where people feel safe to open up?
Yeah. And it's not easy if you're thinking about a whole entire organization culture-wise change to shift. But if you're in a small team,
exactly,
that's a great start. And I always say start small and then, grow out, because that's going to feel that everyone wants to feel that if you have a goal to achieve, and say the goal is to create trust and psychological safety, that if you start small and you see in how it actually happened, you might start others to see that it's possible.
Exactly.
So those of you that are frontline managers, and that's why I'm saying this, is you have so much power and ability that you may not realize in an organization right now, because you have the direct access to such a level of a small group of people to really change things.
Yeah,
I think that is so powerful.
It is.
I think sometimes it's so much more powerful than the CEO of the company, because they're so detached and they don't have that ability to create such magic like that. Hats off to you, frontline managers. Hey, Brian says, how many times have I preached the dissent should be welcomed, not by words, but by actions? Love it, right? Actions speak louder than words. And too many places claim to welcome dissent, but then the actions after the fact don't reflect the words. So people are brave enough to dissent. You should encourage, because they will likely uncover blind spots. I love that, Brian. Now, Brian and I have worked. I think he knows that I pretty much speak my mind. And and I love, Brian, where I know you're a manager now of others. And, what are some of the things, if you want to share, to kind of help create that environment with your teams? Because we really want to encourage others to do that as well. Now, here's the last one, and then we'll wrap up. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to challenge this one, Roxana. I'm warning you. Heads up, it's coming. Coming in. So confront performance problems immediately. Now, again, I already challenged, and we talked about whose standards of performance. And so here they talk about when you don't address performance problem, you condone it. This is where expectations need to be clear, especially in people's role or in teams. And also it needs to be clear what the outcome is. And this is why I'm so, I love goal setting for this reason, because it's a very forward thinking. Now, those of you that might be like to solve problems and move away from something, you still can turn your goals into those people that have that model versus us. We're very, we like to achieve, we're all about goals, and that's why we love it. But some people are away from type people. But still, regardless, at the end of the day, you still need to capture what you're moving towards. And that's a whole other conversation, how to work with people to get them from away to thinking more
Yeah.
toward, if that's their natural state. Whole other conversation.
But
But
I will, for the performance problems, the first question is, who sets the standard? And then if you don't address it, we might have different views of how one task can be performed. Now, if
exactly.
I'm not,
I told
that's
you we
one
were going to
thing.
get this one.
So, yeah, so we need to agree on that, but we cannot agree on that unless we talk about it. So, if I see something that I don't agree with in the way that you perform a task, if I don't tell you, I will never know. Or if I don't ask you, okay, like, what do you think about how did you come to do this task like that? Because I'm doing it a whole differently. If I don't talk to you about it, I don't find out your view on it. I don't find out why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And then we can never agree on something that we don't even talk about. That's where it's super important to address these things, because otherwise, a frustration, and we know that, quickly can turn into a conflict. And that's much more difficult to manage than expressing the frustration and trying to understand why the other person is doing the things they're doing that way.
And this is where this subject ties into a lot of when it comes to feedback and how constant
Absolutely.
feedback loops are extremely
Yeah.
important. So I know a lot of organizations have shifted. Now, if you haven't shifted, get with the times about these annual
Yeah.
performance reviews. Even quarterly performance reviews is not enough.
No. No.
We really should be getting real-time feedback loops in truth today.
Yeah.
That you can do crowdsourcing feedback. You can do all different variety of team feedback, anonymous or what might have you, that could help a person or a group of people improve in their performance. And
Yeah.
especially if you have very clear goals, and this is why I like OKRs for that one reason, when they're done well, I'll say that, that it will help have these conversations of how we are getting to achieving those particular outcomes. And so the more that you can provide more immediate real-time feedback and different perspectives, it allows the individual or group of people to adapt to it faster versus a compounded thing. Like when you talk to somebody and they just have this long list of things and you're like, okay, what do you do with that? Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
nice to just have one little thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I get overwhelmed if somebody gives me, here's a couple of things, and then they go on all the great things you're doing. It right? It's the feedback sandwich, and there's many different techniques, but regardless, a suggestion bottle, whatever you want to call it, if they've waited so long to do it,
Yeah.
and
It's
there's like 10
irrelevant.
bullet
It's
points, it's
irrelevant.
so
I'm not going to care
overwhelming.
about it. Yeah.
It's
It's
way
not.
overwhelming.
No. So if first of all, if I have one thing that you can do, replace the nice culture with the feedback culture. That's kinder.
Yeah, and so maybe we need to have a feedback topic. What do you guys think? Would it be
We have,
interesting for
yeah.
us to have a topic about just giving feedback and just the whole concept around that? Let us know.
Yeah.
So it is,
Okay.
not only are tighter feedback loops better for those in our care, it facilitates better managing. Totally
Yeah.
agree. And you can address these things when they're small before they become huge. Exactly.
Exactly.
Good point, Brian.
Yeah.
Is that why are you going to let so much go down? So it could be just the one thing, but now it became a big thing.
Yeah.
Or now it's multiple things. And so even how we approach our work, and again, I'm going to go agile for 1 minute, is we want to reduce complexity. We want to make it simple. So the more sooner that you give that feedback, it becomes a simpler conversation versus this big, gigantic, complex conversation. I
Address
think it's
that
a win-win on both
disagreement.
parties, right? A
Exactly.
win-win
Like,
on both parties.
it's always like that. Small disagreements not addressed that turn into big conflicts that cannot be solved.
So it's time to
Amazing.
wrap up. Now, what do we have going on? Do you still have that survey out?
Yeah, I do. And it's our short survey for new people leaders. So take the survey. I'll put the link in the comments because we need your help. We need your help to understand what are some of the challenges for you right now. What are some of the topics that you want us to cover? What would help you to learn about, hear about, talk about? So
And
help
please
us
share
help
it.
you.
Share it with any
Yes.
other leader,
Yes.
because what we're trying to
Please.
do is gather some data, and then we're obviously going to share
Yeah.
it when we get to a point where we've gathered enough. So we're going to share it in the comments. Please share it. I think maybe we need to tomorrow, if we do a recap or whatever, share that again, because this is for you too, because once you want to know what other people are saying out there, right? And it'll help us have better topics too on the show. So we are going to experiment. And so next week, what did we land on, day and time?
Oh, next week we are trying to experiment a new day. So we're gonna do the live show on Tuesday instead of Wednesday.
So we are going to try to do, so that would be July 27th, Tuesday. The date's right, but the wrong day in there. We're such game changers. We don't polish.
Yeah.
So, if you look at our polish score, it's a 4. So that's why we just get it done. Anyways, at 12:15. So we're going to have the same time, but we're going to try the Tuesday and see if that fares better with everyone. Let us know. Give us feedback. Yay, nay, bad idea, good idea. And so next week, we're going to talk about the stress factor. And thank you, JJ Rowland, for that idea. She shared a book on LinkedIn. I think it was called The Stress Relief. It gave me the idea. Roxana was like, "Ooh, I like that." And so we're going to talk about how to identify internal, external triggers when it comes to stress. I thought that might be a good thing, because when you get into the state of stress, it messes up everything.
Yeah. And it's happening anyway. So let's
we
do
all
something
deal
about
with
it.
It's human, though.
Yeah.
It's human. But now we're trying to go, okay, well, what do we do with this stuff?
Yeah.
So I hope all of you enjoyed our show. I'm calling it Fireside Chat. Do you guys like that? Fireside Chat. Because again, we're so informal. So meet with us here next Tuesday, not Wednesday, on July 27th at 12:15, and talk about the stress factor, how to identify and external triggers. And if you have any suggestions, let us know. I think our email is info@gamechangingwork.
Or you can DM us.
Game changing work.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm making that complicated. Just direct.
You can also DM us. Yeah, exactly. Or put it in the comments. Whatever works easier for you. We're here. We're listening, and we're sharing.
All right. So,
all right.
Close up shop. Peace out.
And see you next week on Tuesday.
Bye-bye now.